Cynthia.
Well, thank you.
Here with Cynthia Bourgeault, the author of Wisdom of Jesus, Chanting the Psalms, and the Meaning of Mary Magdalene. And thanks for coming into the office. We haven't seen you for a while. Since I saw you last time, which has been a year or two, I've met a few people, mostly Christians, who've told me that your books rearranged their heads. And having read them, I can understand why that would be. But one of the reasons they claim that happened was because something you talk about called the unitive way. Can you say a little bit about what the unitive way is?
Well, the unitive way for me is the capacity to see reality with a different set of eyeballs, so that you see particularity, but you see it from a place of oneness. It's not quite the old mystical, what did the mystic say to the hot dog vendor? Make me one with everything. So you do see the differentiations between things, but they're held within a field of perception which isn't split. It isn't split into inside or outside, me, them, into the usual sort of binaries that we look through when we see the world.
Mm-hmm. But you're saying specifically this is what Jesus was teaching.
Yes,
that's the revolution, I think for some people.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that some people say that, well, it was Jim Marion who first put forward the idea that the kingdom of heaven was Jesus's pet word for what we nowadays call non-dual consciousness. And I think that that's about 95% right, that he was really seeing the world from a different consciousness that didn't perceive out of separation and therefore out of scarcity and out of threat, but saw a fullness that could embrace opposites and bestow wholeness in the very seeing.
It reminds me of that high priestly prayer in the Gospel of John a little bit. There's like, Jesus says his disciples can become one as we are all one, or something of that kind.
Exactly, exactly. And the interesting thing about that oneness is it's a revolving, it's a dynamic oneness. It's not just we're all a great monism, undifferentiated, but that everything is changing place. That I may be in you, and you may be in me, and we may be in the Father, and the Father may be in us. Everything is shifting in a dynamism of self-giving, which puts the oneness in motion.
Doesn't sound too much like the Sunday school that a lot of people grew up with, eh?
Yep.
What you were taught.
Unfortunately, not.
Yeah. Now, does this relate in any way to some of the texts that have been recently discovered, like the Nag Hammadi materials, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene? Does it relate to them in any way?
Oh, it relates to them very strongly.
Yeah.
That the most interesting thing about both the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene are that they don't disagree with the portrait you get in the canonical Gospels in any substantive way. With the Gospel of Thomas, there's at least a 2/3 overlap of material. But where the difference comes in, particularly in the Gospel of Thomas, is there's much greater understanding and emphasis on this transformed nature of consciousness. What the Gospel of Thomas keeps calling singleness, and has been mistranslated for 2,000 years to mean celibacy. What it really means is non-dual vision that sees from oneness. So when you read Thomas and you get what this means, then you can go back and look at some of the hard teachings in the Gospel of Luke. You can go back and look at the parables with a whole different set of eyes, that you're saying, oh, Jesus isn't just giving us moral principles. He's giving us a whole radically different way of seeing the world, which allows a radically different outcome to emerge from it.
One of the things that I remember most about Wisdom of Jesus is when you presented the parables as koans.
Yeah.
That was a revelation for me, because they work.
Yeah.
They mostly work that way. That was pretty wild. So with the unitive way, do you think that disappeared from Christianity, or has it been, has it continued in some way through the years?
I think it's continued in some ways, because the unitive is really a level of seeing, or, using Ken Wilber's maps again, it's a level of consciousness. And since all the great religious traditions have a whole gamut of consciousnesses within them, ranging on the one hand right down to the most superstitious and magical thinking, on up to the sublimely unitive, I think that since Jesus struck the original, he set the bench high in Christianity, and mostly people have failed to come up to what he saw. So that the Christianity was from the very start a dumbed down version of Jesus, largely.
There was one interview I heard you give where you talked, and I may get this wrong, that the incarnation was a kind of blast, and what we have in Christianity today is like one ray of the blast.
Yes, yeah.
Could you say a little about that, or
Well,
am I right?
yeah, I mean, I was talking about the blast and that mostly just in terms of the compass points.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that the understanding when Jesus fell like almost like a meteor into the heart of the Near East, and as what I think is the first non-dual teacher that the Western lands, the Near East, had seen, rays of understanding went out from it. There was a Greco-Roman line that basically went west, and that's the line that we are most familiar with.
In Western Christianity.
Western Christianity, Greek concepts, Roman order. But there was a line that went towards Persia and India. There was a line that went down into Africa, and a very good line that was. And there was a line we now find that got all the way to China. And that along these lines, of course, they're going to be, the understanding is going to fall into the cultural categories that are comfortable for that way of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and as well as into the levels of conscious seeing that can be maintained. So generally speaking, we with our Greco-Roman line probably got the most immature of the lines.
Okay.
You know, with the Greek attraction to concepts and static thinking, you know, the Greek language is noun heavy by its nature. And then the great Roman mistake, cultural mistake, is to not be able to distinguish unity from uniformity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a mistake that carries on into our own time, where for
Mm-hmm.
a good Roman or even Roman Vatican mind, unity in Christ means everybody's doing the same thing, everybody's thinking the same thing, everybody's believing the same thing. There's no sense of a flexible unity that really illuminates and integrates differences into a vast tapestry. And these were ideas that were better preserved in the Christianities that went southeast and northeast and just plain old east.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But what went to China must have, is the Nestorian, I think it would be called, would that just die out eventually? Or?
Yeah, they mostly died out.
Yeah.
The old Syrian ones are mingled with other things.
Right.
Or, and of course they're, even to call it Nestorian, is to put a
It's pretty
Greco-Roman
rare.
handle on something that really didn't mean that at all when it was approached within its own context.
Yes.
They basically just thought that the concepts that these Greek people kept popping out were absurd.
Mm-hmm.
You know, were not even worth dialoguing with.
Mm-hmm.